The village of Eldermire sat far from civilization, surrounded by dense, ancient woods that whispered in the wind. The convent at its heart, St. Helena's, was supposed to be a place of peace and faith, but over the years, strange rumors had begun to circulate. Crops withered without reason, children disappeared in the night, and the villagers avoided the convent grounds after sunset. What the villagers didn't know was that Sister Miriam, the head nun of the convent, hid a secret so dark that it could destroy them all. The night of the ritual was deathly silent. Sister Miriam moved through the shadowy crypt beneath the convent, the only light coming from the flickering candles she had arranged in a circle. She whispered the ancient chant, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and devotion. The young woman, a villager named Clara, struggled against the ropes binding her hands and feet. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to scream through the cloth gag in her mouth. Miriam's cold eyes met Clara's terrified gaze.
"This is necessary," she said.
"Without this, the darkness will consume us all." Clara didn't understand. All she knew was that she was going to die. With one swift motion, Miriam plunged the dagger into Clara's chest. Blood spilled across the stone floor, soaking the strange symbols carved into the ground. The crypt trembled, and a guttural growl echoed through the air. The shadows in the room seemed to shift and move as if alive. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, and a deep voice rumbled, "You've served me well, sister." Miriam bowed her head. "The village will remain under your protection, my lord. No harm will come to us." The creature in the shadows chuckled. For now. The morning after Clara disappeared, her mother, Anna, stood in the town square, calling out her daughter's name. "Clara, Clara, where are you?" The villagers gathered around her, exchanging uneasy glances. This wasn't the first time someone had gone missing in Eldermire. Over the years, many people, mostly young women, had vanished without a trace. "She was at home last night," Anna cried, her voice breaking. "And now she's gone." The village elder, an old man named Henry, stepped forward. "We will search the woods," he said. "But you know what they say, if the forest takes them, they don't come back." Anna fell to her knees, sobbing. That night, a young blacksmith named Thomas, who had been courting Clara, decided to take matters into his own hands. He had heard rumors about the convent, whispers of strange rituals, and cries in the night. Armed with a lantern and a knife, he made his way to St. Helena. Thomas crept through the convent's grounds, his footsteps silent on the cobblestone path. The place was eerily quiet, the windows dark and unwelcoming. He found an unlocked door at the side of the building and slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of incense, but there was something else beneath it, a metallic tang that made his stomach churn. He followed the sound of faint chanting down a narrow staircase, his heart pounding in his chest. At the bottom of the stairs, he found the crypt. What he saw made his blood run cold. The floor was stained with blood, the symbols carved into the stone glowing faintly in the dim light. At the center of the room was the altar, still smeared with Clara's blood. And standing before it was Sister Miriam. Her back was to him, but he could see her hands raised in prayer. "Protect this village, my lord," she whispered. "Keep them safe, and I will continue to serve you." Thomas took a step back, the lantern shaking in his hand. But the sound of his movement caught Miriam's attention. She turned, her eyes narrowing when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly. "What have you done?" Thomas demanded, his voice shaking. "Where's Clara?" Miriam stepped closer, her expression cold. Clara's sacrifice was necessary. Without it, the demon would have destroyed us all. "You're insane," Thomas spat, gripping his knife. Miriam sighed. You don't understand. Everything I've done to protect this village. The pact with the demon keeps us safe. Without it, the crops would fail, the forest would consume us, and we would all perish. Thomas shook his head. You've killed innocent people. Miriam's eyes darkened. And I'll do it again if I must. Before Thomas could react, the shadows in the crypt came alive. They wrapped around him, pulling him toward the altar. He screamed, but the darkness swallowed his voice. When Thomas didn't return, the villagers grew restless. Rumors of his disappearance spread quickly, and suspicions about the convent began to grow. Anna, Clara's grieving mother, led the charge. The nuns know something, she shouted. They've been hiding secrets from us for years. The villagers, armed with torches and pitchforks, marched to St. Helena's. They demanded answers, banging on the convent doors until Sister Miriam appeared. My children, she said, her voice calm. What is the meaning of this? Anna stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. You've taken my daughter. And now Thomas is gone too. What are you hiding, Sister Miriam? Miriam's face remained impassive. I have done nothing but serve this village. Please, return to your homes. But the villagers weren't satisfied. They forced their way inside, searching every corner of the convent. When they found the crypt, the truth was laid bare. The blood-stained altar, the carvings in the floor, and the strange symbols painted on the walls told the story of Miriam's dark pact. You've been sacrificing our children, Anna screamed, her voice echoing through the crypt. The villagers turned on Miriam, their anger boiling over. But before they could act, the ground began to shake. The shadows in the crypt deepened, and the demon appeared. You dare defy me? It roared, its glowing red eyes sweeping over the crowd. The villagers froze in terror as the creature stepped forward, its massive form towering over them. Miriam fell to her knees. Please, my lord, spare them. They don't understand. But the demon was enraged. You have broken the pact, Miriam. The village will suffer. The demon unleashed its wrath on Eldermeyer, destroying everything in its path. The villagers fled in terror, but Anna and a few others stayed behind, determined to stop the creature. Anna found the dagger Miriam had used for the sacrifices. This is the only way, she said. With the help of the remaining villagers, Anna confronted the demon in the crypt. Miriam, broken and guilt-ridden, tried to stop her. You'll only make it angrier. But Anna ignored her. She plunged the dagger into the demon's chest, shouting a prayer she had heard in the old village church. The demon let out a deafening roar before collapsing into a cloud of smoke. The shadows receded, and the crypt fell silent. The village of Eldermeyer never recovered from the horrors of that night. The convent was abandoned, left to crumble into ruin. The villagers who survived never spoke of what had happened, but the story of Sister Miriam and her dark pact lived on in whispers. Anna, though hailed as a hero, carried the weight of what she had done. She spent the rest of her days tending to the graves of those who had been lost. And deep in the woods, the shadows still whispered, waiting for the day they might rise again. After the demon's defeat, Eldermeyer was left scarred, physically and emotionally. The once thriving village became a husk of its former self. Crops withered as if tainted by the creature's presence, and animals refused to return to the fields. The air itself felt heavy, carrying an unshakable sense of dread. The villagers tried to rebuild, but they couldn't escape the memories of what had happened. The crypt beneath St. Helena's was sealed with stones, marked by warnings carved into the rock. Do not enter. The darkness lingers. But despite their efforts, the nightmares didn't stop. Anna, who had slain the demon, became a quiet and distant figure in the village. She rarely spoke to anyone, spending her days tending the graves of Clara and Thomas. At night, she sat by her window, staring out at the dark woods that surrounded Eldermeyer. She heard the whispers before anyone else. faint at first, like a breeze brushing through the trees, but growing louder with each passing night. Anna? She would wake up in a cold sweat, clutching the dagger she had kept since the night in the crypt. Sometimes she swore she saw flickering red eyes in the shadows outside her window. The villagers called her a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She had stopped the demon, but its mark remained on her soul. Despite being abandoned, the convent became a source of terror for anyone who dared go near it. Some villagers claimed to hear chanting echoing from within its crumbling walls, while others reported seeing shadows moving past the broken windows at night. A group of boys, emboldened by curiosity, snuck into the convent one evening. They laughed at the warnings etched into the crypt's seal and dared each other to break the stones. When they returned the next morning, they were different. Their eyes were hollow, their skin pale. They refused to speak of what they had seen, but one boy, overcome with terror, muttered, "The whispers, they're back." The villagers grew more afraid. No one dared approach the convent again, but they could feel its presence, a dark force watching them, waiting. The forest around Eldermire became darker and more foreboding. The trees seemed to close in on the village, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal hands. Hunters who ventured too deep into the woods either didn't return or came back changed. One hunter, Jacob, returned after 3 days missing. His clothes were torn, and his face was scratched and bloodied. When asked what had happened, he whispered, "There's something in the trees. It watches you. It knows your fears." Jacob never spoke again. Villagers began to report strange sightings, shadows darting between the trees, glowing red eyes in the darkness, and guttural growls echoing through the night. Though the crypt was sealed, its influence seemed to spread through the village. People began waking up with scratches on their skin, as if unseen claws had raked them during the night. Objects moved on their own, and whispers filled the air when the wind blew. Elder Henry, the village's wisest man, became obsessed with the crypt. He spent his days poring over old books and records, searching for answers. One night, he stood in the village square and declared, "The demon's essence was not destroyed. It still lingers, trapped but alive. It feeds on our fear." The villagers were horrified, but Henry's warning came too late. The darkness had already begun to seep into their hearts. Neighbors turned against each other, driven mad by paranoia and guilt. Over the years, the population of Eldermire dwindled. Families packed their belongings and left, seeking new lives far from the cursed village. By the time Anna passed away, Eldermire was nearly abandoned. On the day of her burial, a small group of villagers gathered at her grave. As the priest recited the prayers, a cold wind swept through the cemetery. The candles flickered and went out, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the direction of the convent. The remaining villagers fled that same night, leaving Eldermire to the shadows. The village became a ghost town, swallowed by the forest. Over time, travelers passing through the area began to share strange tales. Some claimed they saw the flicker of candlelight in the windows of the ruined convent. Others swore they heard faint chanting or the sound of a woman crying. Braver souls who dared venture into Eldermire always returned with the same story. The air was thick with dread, the shadows seemed alive, and the whispers followed them long after they left. The legend of Sister Miriam and the cursed village spread far and wide. It became a warning to anyone who dabbled in forces they couldn't control. But deep in the woods, beyond the reach of sunlight, the crypt remained. And beneath its sealed stones, something ancient and malevolent waited, biding its time. The whispers in the shadows would never truly fade.